Hello, friends. This is Ola Vikander, your friendly neighborhood Ugaritologist and biblical scholar, back again, and this time with a list. It is a truth universally acknowledged that the internet loves lists. YouTube specifically loves lists a lot. Wherever you look, left or right, you'll find a list of something or other, the 10 best this or that, or the 10 worst this or that. I will not be giving you a list of the best or the worst of anything, actually. So I thought I'd do something else. A while back, there was this thing going around on social media where somebody had asked, what is a statement that is banal within your field, but blows the minds of people outside? And I thought, well, we have to here there has to be something of interest. People who are into biblical studies, Ugaritic, ancient languages generally, historical linguistics, there must be stuff there in the fields, from the fields in which I work, that stuff that's not common knowledge at all. So at first I made one post, and then I made another post, and then I made a whole long thread of things that I thought were rather banal within the field or fields, but which may perhaps confuse or at least surprise some people who are outside of it or outside of them. Uh, so I thought I'd make a list of those because I had some comments when I did these posts. I had some comments saying, "Can't you expound on these points?" And I thought for a while I thought about doing that in the format of the social media involved. It was Blue Sky, but then I realized this would fit much better for YouTube. So I'm going to do a couple of videos going through at least some of these points on my little list. I'll do one per video. So this is number one. I don't know how many of these there will ever be, but this is number one. So the first point that I wanted to make as something rather banal to me at least, which but which might perhaps or may perhaps surprise some people, is more of a subjective vibe I have, but one of which I'm relatively certain. And that is the fact that at least to people whose first language is, say, an Indo-European language like English or Swedish or Danish or German or whatever, people who have those languages as their first language and want to study a biblical language. For many of those people will think that the easier of the biblical languages to study is Greek, and I'm here to tell you that this is absolutely wrong. The first point on my list was the fact that many people with that background will think that Greek, both Attic, classical Attic Greek, and Koine Greek, Biblical Greek, is much easier than Biblical Hebrew. And if they think that, they would be wrong, and I will tell you why. Of course, this is very much down to personal preference. Some people have a knack for learning Greek, I guess, or or the opposite, an unknack for learning Hebrew. But I would say that on the whole, most people from the quote West unquote speakers of Indo-European from the quote West unquote will find classical Hebrew easier than classical or Koine Greek. Uh, the people who do not believe this, they mostly argue that, well, Greek is at least related to the language that I speak, and the script looks much easier. You don't have to learn specific vowel points and weird laryngeal and pharyngeal sounds and so on and so forth. Two things. Yes, the linguistic relatedness is certainly a boon. I mean, given that English and Swedish and German and Italian and Spanish and Hittite and Luvian and Greek are all related, there are certainly many parallels in grammatical structure, for example, especially if you know some older Indo-European language, say like Latin beforehand. but that's still only part of the equation, as it were. Classical Greek and Koine Greek are both difficult because A, the syntax can be quite trying, and B, because there are so many irregularities. There are so many verbal principal parts you just have to learn by heart. Treko dramumai edramon. You know, I run, I will run, I ran. There is no synchronic reason why I run is or I am running is treko while the future is dramumai. You just have to know. You just have to learn it by heart. And there are so many cases like this in Greek where you just have to know the principal parts of the verb. It's like learning German in that way, only much worse because there are more principal parts to learn. Hebrew, on the other hand, is extremely regular. It is so regular, in fact, that you can almost view the Hebrew verbal system, large though it is, as a sort of giant jigsaw puzzle where the main the main thing to crack basically is the almost mathematical precision with which the jigsaw puzzles fit together. So you have to learn the root system, the triliteral root system. Hebrew, as other Semitic languages, is built on roots of the verbs in the language are built on roots of normally three consonantal letters, and then you change the vowels between them and add stuff before them and after them, and sometimes infix stuff, and so and thus you can change the meaning. Like, you know, if you have Qadash, he was holy. Qadashash, he was holy. Qiddesh, he sanctified. Hiqdish, he pronounced holy. Mequddash, sanctified. Meqaddesh, sanctifying. Yaqaddesh, he will sanctify. Aqaddesh, I will sanctify. So, and so on and so forth. In all those words, you hear the letters q, d, and sh, which make the word relate to holiness in some way or other. And then you switch around the vowels and the prefixes and suffixes and stuff, and you form words like that. And it's all very regular. Of course, there are verbs in Hebrew that are hard, like, you know, the specifically the so-called weak verbs, which are verbs that lose one or perhaps two of these consonants, or they change form. And that can be extremely frustrating. And I know this because I've taught Hebrew for a decade and a half, and that's where many students struggle when they have to learn the weak verbs. But the thing is, even the weak verbs have rules to them. They're not entirely irregular. You just have to learn more rules. What I always say about Hebrew is it's rules upon rules upon rules upon rules upon rules upon rules upon rules in a big stack. And then you invert the stack, and then you have the word that you actually read, and then you have to go through the stack backwards. But if you learn to do that in a logical and stringent manner, you can crack most Hebrew verbal forms quite easily. And that goes for many Semitic, at least ancient Semitic languages. Whereas in Greek, if you don't know that dramuma is the future of treko, you're a bit screwed, really. I mean, you can look it up, of course, but you can't crack it by means of logic. You just can't. And Greek also has so many fascinating syntactical things, you know, optatives with and without the with and without the particle un, all that stuff, subtle stuff. Hebrew has stuff like that too, but you're normally not confronted with that stuff when you do first year Hebrew. The syntactical conundra of Hebrew are later in your linguistic development, which means that it actually getting into the language, I would say, is much faster for Biblical Hebrew than it is for Classical or Biblical Greek. And again, this may seem counterintuitive to some because Greek sounds similar to whatever language you're used to. And, you know, Western languages often, like English, have vast amounts of loan words from Greek, which give you some sort of a head start in vocabulary, I guess. But still, it's a much more difficult language to get started in, and believe me. Um, Also, the alphabet thing. If you want to learn a biblical language that is Biblical Hebrew or Koine Greek, or for that matter, Biblical Aramaic, let me tell you, the alphabet is the least of your problems. It really is. When I teach Hebrew, we go through the alphabet in the first 2 weeks, the alphabet and the nikud, that is the nikud, the vowel points, and that's since both Greek and Hebrew have rather phonological spelling systems, it means that there is a relatively good matchup between the spelling and the sound system of the language. Not exact in either case, but it's relatively good, much better than English or Swedish anyway. Which means that you can learn fluency in reading as you go on. And the fact that the Hebrew letters and Aramaic letters which are the same, in at least the way we read Hebrew today, uh, that these letters seem a bit alien if you're used to Latin characters, whereas Greek letters look a little more similar. That's irrelevant. You get through it quickly, I promise you. But just keep keep yourself away. Just keep away the alluring wish to transliterate everything, because if you do that, you'll never gain fluency in reading the language. But and this, of course, goes for both of them, both Greek and Hebrew, and of course Aramaic as well. So my first point on the list, which I about biblical studies, comparative linguistics, and Semitics topics that I think will surprise some, is the fact that I really, really honestly think that Biblical Hebrew is much, much easier to get started with than Biblical Greek, and especially Attic Greek, which is it really it has its cool stuff. There's cool stuff in there, but it takes longer to get into. So that was number one, and hopefully we'll see each other in number two. And remember, the texts we know as the Bible read best in their original languages. Thank you.